Alrighty, welcome to the Breakdown with Berckenhoff. I'm just going to make sure we are all live on the platforms, and then we will get going here, and we'll get with the proper podcast introduction, I guess you would say here. So, those who don't know, before we get into like the main introduction, I'm doing the Breakdown with Berckenhoff in my dorm. So usually I have two computers, but since I'm doing it in the dorm, I don't have two computers, so I'm gonna have to bounce around between these two screens to check your comments. But I highly appreciate comments, of course. But so now that we get stuff going on, I'm just gonna post this a couple more places, and then we'll get going with the proper introduction here, as I was just mentioning, and get my mind ready to go. Alrighty, so we're looking good on all three platforms, and that'll bring me to going back to here. Alrighty, so welcome to episode 8, I want to say. I can't even remember now. Episode 9. I knew something was off. Anyway, welcome to episode 9. Alright, proper introduction. Let's get focused here. Welcome to episode 9 of the Breakdown with Berckenhoff. In today's episode, we are mainly going to be going over RBG, or Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death, as well as covering our usual topics of Joe Biden versus Trump and their polling numbers. So now that we got that real quick out of the way, I'm going to post this to a few other locations, and then we'll get rolling into our first topic. But as I kind of talk out loud here for the podcast viewers who are watching this, well, after this live recording is done, I am a part of the Freedom Scoop Network, and it is freedomscoop.com. It is essentially a group of individual content creators that are like-minded people, are independent type of people that talk about news, so that you don't always get your news or your information from one mass media source. We think it's very important that you are well-rounded in your news coverage and you're not just hearing one thing. And we feel as individual American people, or individual people, and not people who are a part of a major network like Fox News or CNN, that we can give our own sort of perspective to issues and to concerns for the news out there. In other words, we feel giving a actual person's opinion of news is very important to understanding what happens in our life or in the culture, especially with how rapid news is. Especially with how rapid the news cycle is pre-election, or at least the month before the election actually gets fully on our way. Well, it's already on our way, but until votes started getting casted, I guess would be the best interpretation. But I'm just going to post this to Facebook real quick, live now with the Breakdown with Berckenhoff. And then we are going to get rolling here. So those who are watching now, or stumbling upon this later on my YouTube or wherever else you might find it, such as BitChute or any other location, that's kind of besides the point. As I was just explaining, I'm part of the Freedom Scoop Network, but I'm not the only one who is there. We also have Stephen Ingaramus, Jay Edgar, The Generational Gap, The R-Rated Conservative, and the Freckles and Brit Show, and they're all, as I was just saying, sort of the content creators like myself that try to just understand news or think out loud. And Stephen Ingaramus and Jay Edgar also have a daily morning show, and Stephen has a lot of interviews later in the day as well. So if you're big into my type of content, or you want to check someone else because you like the idea, I would highly recommend checking out those two channels for the issues. So I'm just going to make sure we get this in one other location, and then we'll get rolling. Sorry for the delay. I just want to try something else out for this episode, and see if I can get a little more viewers watching live than I have in the past. Because it is very valuable to get people's comments, because I highly... it makes the show flow better, and it gets my brain thinking a little bit more. Because when you're just talking out loud and kind of talking to yourself, it can get a little repetitive, or you're trying to think of other ideas, but you can't necessarily think of those ideas because you're only in one head or one mind, rather than many others minds out there. And that's why I value the comment sections for YouTube and whatever else. But now that I have that posted to here, we can get rolling with the actual topics. And I guess before I just stumble on, I'll make sure I haven't missed anybody in the comment sections before we get majorly started. And those who are watching, now, it's probably gonna be a little rocky for the podcast, but that's all part of the show. So I see someone on YouTube for the comments, and it's by Kelly Kinney, and she says, "All the love to you, keep going," and thank you very much. Highly appreciate that. But we'll roll into these first topic. But real quick, before I kind of read into the articles, most of the articles kind of say similar things because they're all getting their news or their perspectives from the same sources or the same mindset, the same mind frame, or whatever terminology you want to use for that. The main thing about Ruth Bader Ginsburg is the fact that she had a lot of medical issues, right? But she also lived a humongous career, and a career of activism, really. At the time that her story is very fascinating. I'm going to give a very abridged version, a very rocky version, not one you're going to see in a polished documentary, so to speak, of her life. But essentially, she was somebody from the very start of her career, and you can read this on her Wikipedia page or whatever else, was somebody that you could say got discriminated against because she was a woman, especially at the time where her husband made more money than she did when she was doing the same job as her husband, or even a higher level job than her husband beforehand, or anybody who, or any law colleague or anything like that. So she was ahead of those times in the fact that there should be equal pay. Now, a lot of people argue about equal pay now because there's such thing as pink tax and whatever else, and a lot of people think that pink tax and these other sort of taxes don't actually exist anymore. Like the wage gap is another very popular concept that a lot of people theorize either exists now or doesn't exist. It's a very big political debate that is happening now, and that's something that's rather interesting. But going back to her and not getting too much on a side tangent, she lived this career of activism way before her times, way before many people valued it as being cool or being hip or something that many people should do. But Ruth's career is just absolutely astonishing. I don't think many people can really look at Ruth's career and say that she was somebody that they don't think was very good, or somebody that lacked knowledge, or lacked whatever terminology. You can't look at her actual career and say bad things about her, is how I want to say that. And when I say career, I'm talking about what she's been able to accomplish in her life. That's what I mean by career. Now, where a lot of people have problems with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and we're going to get into this later in the article we're about to read and I'm going to talk about, is the fact that she was somebody who a lot of people believed to have lived a activist career and in the Supreme Court particularly, and have a lot of rulings, a lot of judges, a lot of appearances that she based her decision on just because of her feelings or how she felt about the situation, which is kind of the same thing. Would you get what I'm saying? So a lot of people thought she didn't really rule by the Constitution or by a law document or by a political or philosophical or law philosophy, or there's probably a better word for law philosophy. I'm sure there's some fancy word out there that explains that. But the big thing about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a lot of people who had problems with her, was the fact that they didn't think she really followed a particular set of guidelines, like a constitutionalist or somebody that based their predictions or based how they're going to rule consistently by a set of documents or by a set of principles or by a set of morals or whatever else. A lot of people said that she lived a very wishy-washy career in the Supreme Court, but at the same time, that's hard to 100% argue against, But the main thing about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I don't think even people that don't like Ruth Bader Ginsburg have to at least admit that what she was able to do with her career, and what I mean is her accomplishments and her life, is something that is absolutely astonishing, and that is why a lot of people, for lack of the better terms, fell in love with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But the big problem about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which isn't necessarily 100% just based off of her, and that's the fact that as a Supreme Court justice, some people were kind of turned off by the fact that somebody got that much attention within the job. Because the Supreme Court is the law-abiding court at the very top of the U.S. government. So essentially you have Supreme Courts and you have courts under the Supreme Court that can make judgments and documents and whatever else and rule over issues within the community. Excuse me. But the Supreme Court, for example, you have all the states have their own Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court that we're talking about, and where Ruth Bader Ginsburg laid her career in and all her values, was the top Supreme Court, not just a simple state Supreme Court. So some people don't like the fact that these Supreme Court justices get as much attention as they do, because really they're supposed to just be ruling over particular rules or a particular debate more than just becoming a political icon or a political figure within the community. So that's something I've heard a lot within the debate. Alrighty, so now we'll get into the first article here, and this is by the New York Times, and it states, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Supreme Court's feminist icon, is dead at 87. And this is by Linda Greenhouse. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the second woman to serve in the Supreme Court and pioneering advocate for the women's rights, who in her own ninth decade became a much younger generation unlikely cultural icon, died on Friday in her home in Washington. She was 87. The case was complications of metastatic pancreatic cancer. I heard this word so much and now I can't say it. Metatosis. I heard I don't know. I'll just pass by that one. By the time two small tumors were found in one of her lungs in December 2018, during a follow-up scan for broken ribs suffered in a recent fall, Justice Ginsburg had beaten colon cancer in 1999 and early stages of pancreatic cancer 10 years later. She received a coronary stent to clear a blocked artery in 2014. Barely 5 foot tall and weighing at 100 pounds, Justice Ginsburg drew comments for years of her fragile appearance, but she was tough, working out regularly with the trainer who published a book about his famous client's challenging exercise regime. As Justice Ginsburg passed her 80th birthday and 20th anniversary on the Supreme Court bench during President Barack Obama's second term, she shrugged off hordes of calls of her to retire in order to give a Democratic president the chance to name her replacement. She planned to say, as long as I can do the job full steam, she would say, sometimes adding, there will be a president after this one, and I'm hopeful that that president will be a fine president. When Justice Sandra J. O'Connor retired in 2006, Justice Ginsburg was for a time the only woman on the Supreme Court, hardly a testament to the revolution in the legal status of women that it helped bring about in her career as a litigator and strategist. Her years in the solitary female justice were the worst times, she recalled in a 2014 interview. The image to the public entering the courtroom was 8 men of a certain size, and there was little woman standing to the side. That was not a good image for the public to see. Eventually she was joined by 2 other women, both named by Mr. Obama, Sona Sotomayor in 2009 and Elena Egan in 2010. And this article has loads of information, and all of my articles are published are posted on my YouTube in the description or wherever you might be listening to the podcast in the future in that description as well. So if you're interested in reading about her career fully, you can read this article. That's why I wanted to read part. because it does go into very deep detail about Justice Ginsburg's career. But one of the big things that popped out to me was the debate about Ruth Bader Ginsburg that kind of started off a lot of this commentary for her career, and that was the fact that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was talking about the fact that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had an opportunity. This is politically, right? Had the opportunity to retire from her bench under Obama, and a lot of people thought that she was going to do that because she was obviously very frail in her appearance, as the article mentioned. But also, it's not super uncommon for a justice to retire, but at the same time, it's not uncommon for a justice not to retire at the same time. But a lot of people thought that she was going to retire to give the chance for Obama, as the article mentioned, to pick a justice. And that would make a lot of sense because, in general, Ruth Bader Ginsburg agreed with Obama on many of his stances. Although the Supreme Court is supposed to be neutral in quotations, and here appearances within the court system are making decisions based off of that. At the same time, I guess impartial is a good word, trying to be impartial, but at the same time, these justices are generally picked by presidents of that same liking or of that same philosophical theory or political party, so to speak. So if you have a conservative president like Trump is now, he's probably going to appoint somebody that is very conservative within that justice seat, or at least somebody that is a lot more conservative than, let's say, Obama, if he had the choice to pick who that justice would have been. And we'll read a little bit later on when Obama did try to pass a justice through the Supreme Court position that got blocked by the same person who's wanting to pass the justice now. But that's a whole different article and a whole different topic that we are going to talk a little bit about today, of the whole system of the Supreme Court. But in reality, the Supreme Court is a position of power, and such a high position of power. They serve life sentences, or at least till they want to retire, and they pass decisions of law that make everything else behind that law fall into place. So it's a very, very important position that is often picked just to push your party even more. And I see Edgar on YouTube, and he says, "Do you have reaction videos? I am here for reaction videos." And then he says, "Can you pump your gain about 10%? And I'll have to look to see if I can do that. But real quick on D-Live, thank you for the follow, Andy Watt. I highly appreciate that, of course. And then we'll check on Twitch real quick. Alrighty, nothing on Twitch. So we'll continue on to this next article, and I'll look into that real quick, Ed, on OBS or whatever else. The lighting's very different in this dorm room too, so I'm trying to figure out a good location to kind of set up the webcam, and I've adjusted those settings on the webcam too to make it a little more presentable for everybody who's viewing live. But since it's a podcast mainly, I didn't really want to distract too much from the audio of it, but I will check into that, of course. But we'll continue to this next one by CNN and Andrea DeVog, and it says, "Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Army of Clerks to stand guard at the Supreme Court." And it's loading. That's the problem when I have all this stuff. It's loading the article now, so hopefully it'll load real fast. My computer's been running somewhat slow lately too, because I've been doing a lot of editing for this video that I don't want to necessarily make an announcement on yet for the podcast or for my YouTube, but it's a project I'm really excited for, and once I get at least a 3/4 of it done, I'll make the announcement. But it's a very big project, and I'm only being able to work on it when I have time, so I don't want to make everybody's hopes high and then it be months before it released. But I'm real excited for it. But ever since I kind of started that, the computer's been running slow because I have so many tabs open, and storage space is getting limited and all this other stuff. But it's a real fun project, so I hope that people will enjoy it once I finally release it. Alrighty. When Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg returned for the final time to the Supreme Court on Wednesday, an army of more than 100 of her former clerks will meet the casket and accompany it up the stones leading to the Great Hall, where the Liberty Bell icon presented for about 30 years. The Supreme Court, built on precedent and rooted in tradition, will honor Ginsburg in a private ceremony and in a public viewing, but her former clerks standing guard won't leave the casket. When the casket arrives at the court, some of her clerks will serve as their honorary pallbearers, where the rest of the line, the building steps, about 120 clerks from her days at the Appellate Court, as well as the Supreme Court, are expected to gather at the court. That's a very... Anyway. Besides her family and written opinions, Ginsburg clerks are the most lasting legacy. They begin their tenders as young, inexperienced lawyers and emerge with unparalleled legal credits that will mark their resumes for a lifetime. Supreme Court clerk. And real quick on a comment about that, I don't know too much about the whole legal system really, but there's this lawyer called Legal Eagle on YouTube, and he's talked a little bit about this in one of his videos. I don't remember what the video was titled right now, but I do remember him distinctly talking about how these clerks aren't just your average Joe. Even to get a position to be a Supreme Court clerk or to be a clerk with any justice system like it requires you to be pretty much at the top of your class and be recommended by at least a professor or somebody of precedence, because it's not just a position that you just walk in and get. It's something that is extremely hard and something that is very valuable. So just being a clerk, especially in the Supreme Court, is something that is very high. So just saying that they're like average lawyers doesn't particularly make too much sense for me, but I do get kind of what the article is saying within that point. So, but we're not getting too bogged down on that. But when I read that article the first time and read it now to everybody here, it just caught my attention because it's not something that, it kind of downplays the role just to be one. But anyway, but for many, working for Ginsburg wasn't just a legal lesson. She also instilled the notion that women could have it all, but maybe not at the same time. She praised her life partner, her husband Marty, the only man she would say who cared that I had a brain. The justice who was a night owl, a stickler for administrative law, and close friends with her ideological opposite, the late Justice Scalia, was a role model in both law and life. The justice taught us all a thing or two about a life well lived, said former clerk Lori Ivana McKill. And it talks a little bit more about some other clerk opinions on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But that was that article, and we'll quickly move into this next article that is talking about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the actual event that happened, because this was later on compared to everything else. So here we go with this next one. And Supreme Court Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her future, may her memory be a revolution. And just to talk about that, because I think I might have accidentally deleted that last article when I pressed the thing on button 2 times, but really all I wanted to show there was the physical event that happened with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because she attracted a whole bunch of her legal clerks, as the article was just mentioning and as it just said. And really, for people who are listening and not viewing the image, even though I'm not showing it now, but anyway, that's besides the point. It was a whole bunch of people in suits and everything on the Supreme Court. Famous pictures you'll see of the steps or wherever else if you've seen a movie about Supreme Court or a documentary or just photos in general. And that was really all the article was, and that was all I was really going to show, because it basically just mentioned the same sort of thing. And it also mentioned people who went there to view the session of like the average Joe type of people. But we'll continue to this Fox News article here. I'm not a particularly religious Jew, but I found myself very much looking forward to Rosh Hashanah this year. It wasn't because I was going to be celebrating with family or frankly celebrating at all. I just needed 2020 to end, and if moving to the Jewish calendar was going to make that happen, when I was all in on 5781. The Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and suddenly 5781 was just as bad as 2020. I've since learned that according to Jewish tradition, a person who dies on Rosh is known as, I don't know how to pronounce the word, a person of great righteousness. There is no better descriptor for Ginsburg, and in reading and touching tributes to her those past few days, it is clear that everyone, no matter their partisan affiliation, saw righteousness in her. I was lucky enough to see her in person when I heard her speak just over a year ago. Her story, told in few words, oozes with righteousness and alliterated generations of dedicated RBG fans who love her for her openness and dissonance as much as her pop culture domination. Ginsburg will go down as history as an undisputed icon. She will also now be forever linked to what will be a difficult and ugly battle for her seat. The next 40-some days will be filled with threats of court packing, expanding the court, and doing away with the filibuster. We will regiment former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid's decision to make the so-called nuclear option in 2013, and whether Senator Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and other Republicans are hypocrites for refusing to even give Judge Merrick Garland a hearing in 2016. And that is what I was going to talk about before I move into the next parts of the article. And that was essentially what I was mentioning about Mitch McConnell, who is the House leader. During Obama, he was in a lame duck period for appointing, or for president, I guess you would say. The transition period between him going out and somebody else coming in. And real quick, I just see Ed's comment here. I was looking for something on your volume. I have my volume cranked and I can barely hear you. Alright, well, let me see if we can fix that real quick before I get into it, as I don't want to have the audio quality bad, because really it's a podcast, so really the audio is the most important thing. But I'll just make sure we got everything hooked up right. Yeah, we should be better now. I adjusted a little more up on the OBS, so we should be a little higher now for mic volume. But we also might just make this point a little bit more here, see if that helps a little bit. But anyway, as I was just saying about Mitch McConnell being the House leader, had a chance during the lame duck period of the former justice and the new justice, so to speak. But as anybody who knows about politics, the lame duck period is the transition period between the last president and the new president, and that's something that is very important to understand with that issue. So I know many people were talking about Mitch McConnell and saying that he did nothing wrong because it was in the lame duck period. It wasn't while President Obama was physically president, so to speak, although he technically still had the title because it was the lame duck period. I don't know enough about politics to really say if that is 100% a valid opinion, but it was an opinion that I was hearing on a lot of YouTube channels and political commentary that I listened to on podcasts or whatever else. But I was also hearing that Mitch McConnell is a hypocrite, and he's just trying to do this to boost up his party's power, because as your House member and as the member of the Republican Party, so to speak, he wants to be able to make sure that the Republican Party stays in power, or at least retains all the information for moving forward and everything like that. So it's very important to keep that power and to keep the Republican power higher within that core position. So a lot of people are saying that Mitch McConnell holded off hearings of the justice because of that fact alone. And I was also hearing that one of the reasons people speculated that he did that was because the justice was very much left compared to what his positions are in politics, and that Obama picked someone like that justice just so that event in the lame duck period would happen and make Mitch McConnell look bad and make the Republican Party look bad. And obviously that opinion does seem kind of biased in its nature, but it is something that should be accounted for when in politics, because politics in general is very biased. So it's something that we need to kind of understand and make sure we take into account with everything. And so if Ed's still there, just to make sure, is the volume any better as far as that goes? Because I did turn it up a little bit. It's almost all the way up, so if it is bad, I might just have to try something else for the next episode, or figure out a different setup to go forward. But I'll continue with this last little part of the article I wanted to read. But like so many Democrats, I'm just so damn tired of fighting against the GOP that seems to play politics better than we do. I've often thought that if we had even half that amount of ruthlessness as Mitch McConnell, the political landscape would look a lot different, and his decision to move ahead with filling the vacancy left by Ginsburg when Americans have already started voting is a testament to that. There are plenty of articles on what Democrats should do to protect Ginsburg's seat, but if I'm really honest, I don't think anything will work. In the immediate aftermath of her passing, I thought there might be enough Republican senators who would recognize the absurdity of a president filling a Supreme Court seat with just over a month to go in an election. Plenty of them were on record saying as much. But with the Utah Republican Senator Mitt Romney's decision to vote on Trump's nominee, all hopes were dashed, and I'm left as usual thinking that Alaska Republican Senator Lisa whatever, the only decent one in the lot, Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins, undoubtedly made her choice to even make a chance at keeping her seat. To this end, my dad texted me on Tuesday writing, "It's happening no matter what, just have to win." And then it goes on to talk a little bit more. But those last opinions are a little bit interesting for the fact that politics is very biased depending on what party you believe in, and really the mass media as a culture and as the whole humanity goes, mass media, long story short, mass media makes people be focused just on their party. And the way political atmosphere and the political culture is, everybody is narrowed in on what their party believes. And if you're somebody that just reads Fox News, you're conservative. And if you're someone that just reads CNN, then you're liberal. And really, that's very true. That's not even that's not even a stereotype at this point. That's just a fact. That's truth. That's just something that is stated and that holds value, because the mass media and the way news is makes everybody believe just in that one thing. And one of the big things about Ruth Bader Ginsburg is that her death has now allowed people to be tuned into what's going on. In other words, her death has now made people be aware of all the political atmosphere. And as we're going to be watching soon in a little bit, that has made a lot of people have reactions to Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her passing, because Trump could very well have a chance to fill 3 Supreme Court justices in his time of just his first, his first term of being a president, and that is very, very, very impressive. But I'll read Jay Egger's comment here. He says, "Your OBS is your post amp. I will see if we can figure out how to bump your preamp off air." Yeah, I'll definitely work with you on making some of these tech issues a little bit better, and maybe even setting up that restream bot. I know I got it potentially set up. I might just try it on Streamlabs for my next stream later, just to test it out, because I might actually have it. I just haven't used Streamlabs yet, because I did do a small test run and it didn't work. But I think I might have fixed that issue because I watched some videos on it. But anyway, long story short, we could work on some of those issues as well. Alright, this is the last article on Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and then we just have these 2 smaller things that I thought was rather funny for this topic. But this one states, and this is by The Guardian and David Litt, "Republicans will replace RBG, but Democrats hold the trump cards." No, really. In 2005, In 2005, while bragging about his history of sexual assault, a reality TV host laid out a simple theory of power. When you are a star, Donald Trump explained to Access Hollywood host Billy Bush, they will let you do it. 15 years later, Trump has gone from an apprentice to the Oval Office, from grabbing women without their consent to picking a woman to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. Yet his approach to power has remained quite consistent. Where you have the Senate, when you have the votes, you can sort of do what you want, he told Fox and Friends. This is what the political scientists call constitutional hardball, and what the rest of us call doing whatever you can get away with. It is not a philosophy unique to Trump. In fact, it's one reason why he and Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell, a man as duly calculating as Trump, is gushily impressive, have so much insurmountable late-in-life partners. The majority leader has spent decades in Washington treating public service as a sport, going so far as to title his memoir The Long Game. Now both men have the chance of a lifetime. The opportunity to confirm a far-right justice to replace a liberal icon just weeks before Election Day. It's hardly surprising that even courtesy talk of principle or restraint has gone out the window. Politically speaking, Trump and McConnell are stars. We will, they assume, let them do it. In short term, they might be right, unless 4 Republicans defect. They can install a deeply conservative justice in the waning days to the president's first term. But in a long run, the great loser of the Mitch McConnellism might turn out to be McConnell himself. No one should be rooting for constitutional hardball, but if a hardball must be played, there are plenty of reasons to think Democrats will ultimately come out on top. In fact, engaged Democrats don't even have to embrace Donald Trump. Whatever you can get away with mentally to undo McConnell's life work, all you have to do is exercise slightly less restraint. And it goes on to talk a little bit more, but I don't want to just read out the whole thing to everybody here. But I wanted to kind of catch the main points. But one of the big things they talked about was that the Senate does have an opportunity to pass a new justice to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg, somebody who was far left and a left, as the article called her, a left icon within the justice in the Supreme Court, with someone who is far right, as the article said. But really, it's probably going to be someone that is leaning right. I don't necessarily see Trump picking a super ultra conservative candidate, because his last candidate, Kavanaugh, is very much a moderate type of justice compared to somebody you would think would be so extreme, like a Justice Roberts on the Supreme Court or something like that. But I don't think that's really besides the point. The main question I have is the fact of, should Donald Trump and should the Republican senators or Mitch McConnell or whatever else want to go ahead and pass the justice right away, or should they wait after the election if Donald Trump does win? Now, you could argue, a lot of people say that Trump doesn't necessarily seem as confident as he did in the last election cycle, so that may be a problem of concern if you think that you potentially could lose an election, because nobody is going to think that you're going to be able to win the election outright. Elections are a very tough situation. A lot of people didn't see Donald Trump winning the last election, but yet Donald Trump is the president of the United States. So some people, they don't necessarily see Biden winning the election, but with the way how mail ballots are in, if you're somebody who's more conspiratorial, you may think that these mail ballots and the delayed election results that are almost bound to happen at this point could result in Joe Biden being president, even if it doesn't revolve election fraud or whatever else you might want to say for that. But one of the big things about this whole situation is the fact of if Trump should go ahead and pass the justice now, because I was just mentioning the fact that ultimately Trump can pass it by, but is it necessarily smart? Now, you would have to win the election in order to be able to appoint a new justice, because as we see with Obama, the chance to pass a lame duck Supreme Court justice is probably not very likely to happen. So it's either you do it rapidly and do it now and potentially hurt people's polling numbers, or you wait and do it now. And if you wait, you have to bring up the point of polling. So polling is a very big concern, or a very big topic within who you pick as the Supreme Court Justice. Because you can think of it in this way. Who does the death of the Supreme Court Justice, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, promote the most? Which side of the political... Whoops. Sorry about that. Which side of the political debate makes people more active to want to go out and vote? That's one big thing. So you could argue, well, it's probably the left, because Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a left icon and a left figure within the political atmosphere. And I would say that there's probably some truth to that. A lot of people were very big fans about who Ruth was and what Ruth was able to do within being the Supreme Court Justice. But at the same time, I've heard many arguments that this might promote the right even more to come out, the conservative, the Republicans, to come out and vote even more than there might be in the past, because the Republicans have a huge chance to change the Supreme Court in a way that most likely will pass legislation or remove legislation that they're not fans of. And one classic example of that is through abortion. If they're able to pass a moderate to conservative justice, they're going to outweigh the liberals, or more people who are likely to vote no for, let's say, overturning Roe v. Wade or any abortion law such as that. So they could have a big chance to overturn something many conservatives and many Republicans value as murder or value as bad, such as abortion, to overturn. But also you could potentially be pro Second Amendment Supreme Court, rather than someone who seemed a little bit in between, if not Second Amendment type of court. But I'm going to play this video by AOC, and then a last kind of funny video about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and what's happened from it, and then we'll get on to our next topics. Alrighty, whoops. Get this set up real quick. Dang it. I thought I fixed that. Real quick, 1 second. That happened last week too. Alright, I'll make sure we're all muted here. Nope. Alright, we should be good. I thought for sure I did that. Sorry about that. And I realized we're almost at 42 minutes now. Dang. I knew that this topic was going to take up a lot of stuff, so we may be having a little bit longer of a podcast here than beforehand. Be like my first podcast. So we're waiting for this first video to load here. I don't think it's loading. Let me refresh it real quick. Yeah, this is a problem with doing it online. I have all these articles obviously pulled up, but even having them pulled up doesn't necessarily mean they're going to work right off the bat, especially if the computer is being slow, which with the Wi-Fi here, it can get real slow. So anyway. Yeah, I think we're going to have to give up on this first one. It's not wanting to load. I don't want to be there too much of a pause. So we'll go to this next one. And this one's probably the more funny article, or not really article, but short video here on Twitter from a reaction of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I'll just let the video speak for itself.
To people who are pro-life, I fucking hate you! Why can't women have abortions? I'm just on the fucking pro-life side, driving down the fucking road, having a mental breakdown, and I just want to say, all you people are you're so fucking stupid! This I could feel pain before I was born as a baby! Bitch, I was born, and I can feel pain. I wish I wasn't fucking born! Stop bringing these fucking kids into horrible fucking homes just because you're pro-birth! You're fucking stupid!
That just makes me laugh for sure. I mean, there was so many more that I kept seeing on the internet of these freakouts from Ruth Bader Ginsburg death, but whew, that was one of the more funny ones. And the video that wasn't able to play here on Twitter was a video of AOC and her, for lack of better words, as the Twitterer said, kind of radicalizing the left to go out and vote for somebody to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg that's on the left. So in other words, she was wanting to re-energize her party to come out and vote so that they don't lose the Senate seat, or not the Senate seat, but the Supreme Court seat for that spot. But one of the bigger things that just kind of came to mind again through talking about that AOC example was the fact that I've also heard a lot of, especially the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris campaign, or as Harris said earlier, the Kamala Harris and Joe Biden campaign, which was rather funny, but that's a whole side tangent there. But they were wanting to basically put out this statement, or put out this point, that the people who should be out and vote are the people that, let me restart. They put out a statement basically saying that whoever the president is should have the opportunity to elect the Supreme Court justice. So in other words, whoever this next president is in an election should be the people's president, and therefore that people's president should have the opportunity to appoint the justice. But one of the funny things about that whole thing is that the people did vote for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is still president, so by their logic he would have the opportunity to still vote, or not very necessarily vote, but to appoint a Supreme Court justice. But then again, if you want to play devil's advocate on that and be like a double devil's advocate, you could think of the fact that Donald Trump only has a month in order to appoint somebody. So as I said in my earlier question, it may not be politically smart for Donald Trump to appoint a Supreme Court justice now, with just having a month left. So that's something that is a political debate, and I've heard many people will kind of talk about and basically saying, if you were Donald Trump's political strategist, or if you were Donald Trump yourself, would you vote, or would you appoint a justice now, or would you wait? And there was a very large debate on that. But this next article, or these next two articles, are related, but something a little bit more goofier than that last segment. And this one is by Fox News and James. It says, Costco removes popular cheese after Black Lives Matter controversy. Pinto Cheese Company owner compared protest movement to terror organization. Costco has stopped carrying products from Pinto Cheese brand owned by South Carolina mayor who called the Black Lives Matter and Antifa movements terror organizations. Brian Henry, the mayor of Pennsylvania Island and owner of Pimento Cheese, told the Georgetown Times that the company's products were being pulled as a matter of normal business and that the wholesale retail rotates items in and out regularly. We remain optimistic that Pimento Cheese will be back on our shelves in not too distant future, Henry told the Times. And this is a tweet by Pimento Cheese, and I'm probably not saying that name right, but anyway, Pimento Cheese is on sale from August 17th to 30th at all Southwest Regional at Costco warehouse for $1.50. The sale is the Southwest region only and does not include these places, blah blah blah. When reached for comment, a Costco representative declined to comment on the Pimento Cheese brand. The Georgetown Times published a photo of the sign in the Morrow Beach Costco store stating that the products were discontinued and will not be reordered by Costco, adding that the products were being removed from more than 120 Costco locations. Pimento Food calls for boycott from some consumers following Henry's controversial Facebook post in which he tied the protest movements to the unraveled fatal shooting of his father and daughter following an auto crash. The victims were white, while the accused killer was black. So that was just some more kind of name changing, but not necessarily a name change in this case, but rather Costco as a brand removing something because of political opinion of the owner. And one thing you have to be very careful with when you talk about situations like this is if it was turned on its head, would you be in favor of it? So in other words, if it was a leftist brand, so to speak, and they did something you didn't like, would you want to see that brand removed? And if you say yes, well then you could potentially be a hypocrite on that situation. So there is something you have to be aware of. But even taking that into account, I do find it somewhat silly to remove a brand just on the fact of a political opinion. Because even if it was the opposite opinion and the brand owner did endorse Black Lives Matter or did endorse Antifa, that I don't see why you would remove it for a political stance and saying, "Ooh la la, look, we're removing this because they do support Antifa or they do support Black Lives Matter." I would just choose not to purchase it if it was something that offended me within that stance. So it's just being offended by a name or offended by a brand or offended by a political opinion of an owner is rather silly to me. But if you are someone that does get offended by those situations, you do have that right. Obviously, we live in America, thank you. But at the same time, they shouldn't necessarily be removed because it should be your choice if you want to eat that product or not. The brand shouldn't just remove it just because that brand sees what the other person of that brand's owner said that brand did. It's just rather silly to me. It's just stupid. But we'll go to this next article by ABC News. And it states, Mars drops Uncle Ben's reveals new name for rice brand. The New York. The Uncle Ben's rice brand is getting a new name, Ben's Original. Parent firm Mars Inc. unveiled the change Wednesday for the 7-year-old brand. The latest company dropped a logo criticized as racial stereotype packaging with the new name will hit stores next year. We're licensed to our associates and our customers, and the time is right to make meaningful changes across society, said Fiona Dawson, global president for Mars Foods, multi-sales and global customers. When you are going to make these changes, you are not going to please everyone, but it's about doing the right thing, not the easy thing. Several companies have retired racial imagery from their branding in recent months. A ripple effect after the Black Lives Matter protests over the police killing of George Floyd and other African Americans. And real quick, before we get into some of their examples, I remember covering the Land O'Lakes when they changed their not their name, but their logo, which was typically the Native American lady on the cover of their butter, and then they changed it to basically like a farm / village type of thing, something that was very generic within that situation. So that's something that was rather interesting as far as that goes. But just changing your brand, your name, your thoughts is something that's rather bizarre and kind of fits what I was saying beforehand. If you as a company feel like you need to do it, then go ahead and do it, and I should have a choice for the matter if I want to buy your product or not. But I don't like brands simply giving in to movements like the Black Lives Matter and changing their brands just because of that, because I find the reason for that being rather silly, and I do think a lot of people tend to look at these brands and see them changing their names for something like that and also see it as being silly. But then again, I think most people just buy their rice or buy their butter and don't really care about what the logo is or what the name of the product is for that matter. So it kind of goes both ways for that issue. And then we'll get into some other examples here. Quaker Oats announced in June that it would drop Aunt Jemima from syrup and pancake packages, responding to a criticism that the character's origins are based the Mammy, a black woman content to serve her white masters. Quaker said packaging without the Aunt Jemima image will start and appear in stores by the end of the year, although the company has not revealed the new logo. The owner of Eskimo Pie also said that it will change its name and marketing of the nearly century-old chocolate-covered ice cream bar. Beyond food banks, the Washington NFL franchise dropped the Redskins name and Indian head logo, aimed pressure from sponsors including FedEx, Nike, Pepsi, and Bank of America. And it goes on to talk a little bit more about some of those brands and the Mars company as a whole and changing their logo. But the whole idea of changing your logo or changing your name is something that has kind of talked about a lot in recent times. It's something that in general has been a political issue or a political concern. But I don't necessarily see that issue or that an idea of being something that is necessarily 100% 100% bad. But real quick, I'm just kind of got sidetracked here a little bit when I was going on YouTube. But I do think that the Kelly Kinney, who I saw at the very first of this video, I do think that she has a reaction channel. I don't know if that's what Ed was talking about when he asked that question. I think that question would have been at Kelly, not me, but I read it as my question at first. But I do think I've seen some of her reaction videos. That could be somebody else, but I kind of got sidetracked there because I was remembering a couple of videos that I'm pretty sure I've watched on her channel beforehand. But we'll get into this next batch of topics. And my last batch of topics is, as I've always said, the topic I'm going to end with on all of my podcasts till at least after the election, and that is Joe Biden versus Donald Trump in the political race, and more importantly, polling. But real quick before we bounce into that, I don't know too much about Hunter Biden, but I do have 2 articles about Hunter Biden and the Ukraine policy. So we'll real quickly kind of speed through these before we get into the last topic, because I don't really know that much about the situation, but the whole thing is just in general very sketchy and something that I don't think necessarily a son of a senator should have gotten that position just because he is the son of a senator. And we all know about the leaked phone call of Joe Biden and the former, I think it was former, Ukraine president and their comments about Burisma and whatever else for Ukraine, and essentially trying to get rid of somebody to appoint somebody else that was more in line with Joe Biden's thinking or Obama's thinking, and I put that in quotations, but obviously it was Joe Biden on the call, and I think that phone call got leaked probably a good 6 months ago at this point. Everything kind of has gone by more rapidly than you think when you look back on political events, because the news cycle is just so fast. This article is by The Hill. 2 Senate Republican chairmen on Wednesday released findings from their months-long investigation into Biden's argument that Hunter Biden's work for a Ukraine gas company cast a shadow over Obama's air policy. A controversial report from the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee Chairman Ron Johnson and the Senate Financial Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley comes only weeks before the November presidential election and days before the first debate between President Trump and the Democratic nominee Joe Biden, raising concerns among Democrats that the two are trying to interface in the political election and could spread Russian disinformation. The GOP senators acknowledge in their report it is not clear how much U.S. policy was impacted because of Hunter Biden's work for Ukraine gas company Burisma Holdings, but they argue that it could created an awareness for the Obama Air State Department. The report does not appear to include an example of a decision in which the U.S. foreign policy was changed due to Hunter Biden's work on Burisma. What the chairman discovered during the course of the investigation is that Obama's administration knew that Hunter Biden's position on Burisma board was problematic and did not interfere in an efficient execution of the policy with report to Ukraine, the GOP chairman wrote in their report. So the whole thing about the whole Burisma thing is it seems just a little bit sketchy about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's work, and I'm sure Ed or Stephen Hinkeramus might have more information on this. I haven't really followed this story too much within my research and with what I talk about for politics, but I do know that the whole situation, as I've kind of already said, is very much something that is sketchy for what has happened. But I was going to briefly talk about this New York Post, kind of talking about the same thing, as it says here. They released their long-awaited report on Hunter Biden's work for Ukraine Gas Company. The 87-page report was released Wednesday by Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee Chairman Ron Johnson. The investigation and subsequent report were hammered by delays, first due to the impeachment proceedings earlier this year and then by the coronavirus pandemic. The probe found that in 2015, 2 Obama administration officials voiced concerns to White House officials about the possibility that younger Biden serving on the board of Burisma could create the appearance of conflict of interest, as his father oversee Ukraine policy. And obviously Burisma is in the Ukraine, so yeah, there's not much that needs to be said on that. The report states that Obama's White House knew that Hunter's position prevented the efficient execution of policy with respect to Ukraine. This investigation has illustrated the extent to which officials within the Obama administration ignored the glaring warning signs with the vice president's son joined the board of the company owned by a corrupt Ukraine oligarchy, the report's executive summary stated. Even though Hunter Biden's position on Burisma board casts a shadow over the work of those advancing anti-corruption reforms in Ukraine, the committees are only aware of 2 individuals who have raised concerns to their supporters, or to the superiors. It continued despite the efforts of the individuals, their concerns appear to have fallen on deaf ears. So that's kind of the whole Burisma thing, and I'm not going to spend that much more time talking about it, but I just wanted to give kind of my more final thoughts. If it is true what everybody was saying about Burisma and Hunter Biden's situation on it, that is something that is very, 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 very wrong, because conflict of interest should be something that is taken very seriously in politics, because it's something that could lead to many laws or many sort of ideas getting passed that don't necessarily provide good impact for people. In other words, these laws and situations are something that through passing by conflict of interest support your own stance, support your own idea, rather than enforcing what you should be doing as a politician, and that is helping your constituents. In other words, the reason the conflict of interest are so important in politics is because if you're just being a politician for yourself and for your job and for trying to get things passed to make you more wealthy, if you were a former oil business person or whatever else, it's something that should be highly illegal. Because as a politician, or even as a politician's son, through serving committees, you have the opportunity to change the system, and by changing the system, you should make sure that there's no conflict of interest to change your situation for what you want. Now, before we get into the polling, like I'm going to end every podcast with after the election, as I said earlier, I wanted to quickly talk about the situation of Joe Biden. Now, this is a week ago, and I don't remember covering it on my last podcast because I think I did it before this campaign event actually happened. But if I did cover it in my last podcast, I apologize. I don't remember doing so, but that doesn't mean that I didn't cover it back then. But essentially, Joe Biden decided it would be smart to play Despacito on a campaign event to Latin Americans. And he did this He did this on Latin Heritage Month. So it's similar to like the Black Lives Matter month, where you can learn about Black Lives figures. They also have Latin Heritage Month, and where you can learn about Latinos and Latino history and all of that. And the singer, or one of the singers, Despacito, introduced Biden in this campaign event, and Biden came out and basically was like, I have one thing to say. Hold on. And then he got out his phone and played like 30 seconds of Despacito. And obviously this was total cringe, and nobody really thought this was very, how do I say it? Not cringe. I don't know if there's other words for that, but it was just something that is absolutely like astonishing, and just almost makes your skin crawl, or skin hairs peek up, because it's like so much cringe, as you see the video here.
I just have one thing to say. Hang on.
has been like the 10th time I've watched it. It may even be more than 10 times. And it still makes me laugh, especially seeing people's reactions, like this Twitter post I have here from the Washington Examiner. But the whole idea of doing it is just so crazy. It's something that just makes me laugh. Oh man, that's just so funny. But I'm gonna read some of the people's Twitter's post because this is just hilarious. The real Jerome Star says, and this is a Yang Game person, funny, if white people were racial majorities, he would have played Shape of You by Ed Sheeran. This one says, Joe, I don't have hot sauce in my purse, but I got Despacito on my phone. Biden has peaked too soon. The guy who introduced him is the singer of the song, and he played it out of respect, this person tweets back. Yeah, that's a very far stretch. Now, I do give that he was the singer, or one of the singers of Despacito, so there is some reason that Joe Biden would play his song in other words, but yeah, I don't know if I'll give that one for that person here. And then this one says, yeah, because playing a song that has a sexual connotation, no matter how popular it became, it really is going to convince Latinos. Does he think Hispanics are so superficial that they make decisions on what songs he likes? Good grief, what an insult. Stop pandering. And this is by Dania Alexandrio, who is a blue check on Twitter. So a Latino, not that just being a Latino provides perspective, but it's kind of like the Hodge twins, I think they're called, on YouTube. They reacted to similar things that Joe Biden's done with black supporters and black voters, where they're just like, as black people, they're like, this is just so see-through. It's like so, just so bad, you know. And I think the Latinos are seeing through what Joe Biden has done. And obviously, this is a gold mine for Donald Trump and his campaign to talk about on potential political ads or even political debates here in the future, because that is just past cringe when it comes to politics. So I thought that was rather funny. Before we dive into the main topics here with polling numbers with Trump versus Biden, but real quick before I move into that, I'll make sure to check your comments, but my computer is being slow again and going to this next article, so I'm just waiting here. So I'll give a few more of my perspectives for Joe Biden and the Despacito thing. So obviously it's just super cringe. I don't think anyone looks at that situation and think that that is not cringe. You have obviously had that one reply, and that's why I wanted to include it when I read it as well, just because he got introduced by that person. He played the song out of respect. I do think that some people are probably going to see that as being truthful, but at the same time, that's just a rather far-fetched claim. I don't necessarily see being so truthful within that matter. Now, the first article for this next topic is by 538, and it states, Trump supporters aren't shy, but polls could still be missing some of them. And this is by Jeffrey Scalee. There's this theory that won't die. It goes something like this. Some unknown segment of President Trump's supporter is too shy to admit they back him, usually offering an explanation for why Trump's poll numbers weren't better in 2016 or why they are not better now. The idea hinges on Trump being such a controversial candidate that it's not socially desirable to say you support him, and as such, there is a lot of hidden Trump support not captured by polls. Now, I'll give my first perspective on this idea. I do think that that theory does have some truth to it, because as I kind of said on my last podcast talking about my mom and being someone that doesn't necessarily like what Donald Trump says, but doesn't support what Joe Biden has as policies or whatever you want to say there. I don't think a lot of people like what Donald Trump says, but his hardcore Trump MAGA hat wearing supporters are mainly people that enjoy what President Trump has to say because they see him as being see-through. They see him as being somebody that's a lot more transparent compared to a polished politician such as Joe Biden, although I'm not sure polished is really the correct word, compared to someone that is more like the idea of polished or dictionary definition of polished, like let's say Obama, but he's not necessarily a career politician like Joe Biden has been. So Joe Biden does know the game of politics very well, and it's something that should be taken into account within this whole situation. But obviously you have those types of supporters for Donald Trump, but you also have a lot of people who aren't necessarily wanting to support Donald Trump because of what he says or potentially what he does, or just the idea of how the mass media portrays Donald Trump. But at the same time, they know enough to know that they don't want to vote for the other candidate. So it'll be interesting to see some of the numbers 538 has come up with, but I do think there is some truth to that theory. Only there is scant evidence of this. In fact, there's some evidence against the shy Trump theory. If shy Trump voters were a thing, for example, you might expect a difference in how respondents reply to surveys conducted via telephone versus those anonymously submitted online. The idea being that this bias is less likely to kick in when a representative is dealing with a faceless computer instead of a real person. However, as Morning Consult new 2004 respondent study shows, Trump performed about the same against Joe Biden regardless of whether the pollster interviewed response by phone or online. As Kyle Drop, Morning Consult chief research officer, summed it up for me, we run a large sample study that does not find any shy Trump voters exist at a national level for 2020 matchup. The firm also checked the results among respondents in battleground states, but there is little to no sign of Trump shy voters. And it talks a little bit more, but I was wanting to go into some of the numbers here at the bottom of the article, where it talks about how polling bias is small and they're unpredictable. So obviously it's hard to really tell about these Trump voters. And one of the big things about polling is it only gets a very small target size of the share. Now obviously any sort of poll might give you a little bit more of a perspective on how that candidate is doing. But from the evidence of this 538 article, and I read the whole thing, but I didn't want to read all of it on air because it kind of repeated the same points as I've already read to you here. But it's rather interesting if you are somebody that originally thinks about Trump shy voting and it making sense, because the article does bring up several good points about how the theory may not make total sense. But at the same time, personally, and this could just be my own bias, I do think that there is a large percentage of voters out there that don't necessarily say that they support Trump, but are going to vote for Trump. But at the same time, I think the majority of Trump type of voters who aren't just 100% pro-MAGA wearing Trump supporters are people that are going to vote for Trump just because they don't want to vote for Joe Biden. And I think I'm more in that crowd. But at the same time, I don't necessarily like either candidate that much at all. But that's kind of besides the point. And this is by the New York Times here, and it states, 5 things Biden and his allies should be worried about. Alright, here we go. And this is by Thomas B. There are at least 5 reasons Joe Biden's constant lead over Donald Trump does not guarantee him a lock on the White House. First, there are candidates that Trump's base to support whites without college degrees is more energized and committed to voting this year than any key Democratic constituent, and there is also evidence that polling does not reflect this. Second, Latinos, who are key to the outcome in several crucial states, Arizona and Florida for example, have shown less support for Biden than in the past for Democratic nominees. Many Hispanic voters seem resent to any campaign that defines them as broadly as people of color. Third, absentee voting is expected to be higher among Democrats than Republicans, subjecting their ballots to a greater risk of rejection, a fate more common to mail-in votes than to in-person voting. That is actually an interesting idea, because a lot of people, when they think of mail-in ballots, are thinking that there could potentially be fraud within the system, or even accidental fraud through ballots getting lost, and they tend to think that that favors more of a Joe Biden than a Donald Trump, because the multiple people that come out with this conspiracy theory, for lack of better words, think it leans towards a Democratic president coming out, such with being Joe Biden. But at the same time, I haven't really thought too much about the opposite being true and simply being lost ballots in general, and these lost ballots could be any of the candidates, and just the fact of losing ballots within the system through accident or through intentional fraud is something that could swing either way, even though it tends to mainly be talked about swinging only one particular way and being towards Donald Trump. One second here. Alright. Fourth, the generic Democratic-Republican vote. Would you be more willing to vote for Republican or Democratic candidate for Congress through early July favored Democrats by more than 10 points, but has since narrowed to 6 points? Fifth, the debates will test Biden's ability to withstand 3 90-minute battles against an opponent known for brutal personal attacks. These are two factors such as the possibility that the Republican Party will conduct an effective voter suppression drive, or that Trump and his adversaries will contrive new mechanics to pave their way to victory. Controversially, over a turbulent year, impeachment, the pandemic, a recession, and an emergence of a stronger Black Lives Matter movement, one thing has remained constant: Biden's lead over Trump. In 2019, nearly 12 months ago, the NBC Wall Street Journal had Biden 9 points ahead of Trump. The same pattern in national polling has held true in nation suburbs, as many accounts are as well as the 2020 Combat Zone. Robert Giffen, the research director at the nonpartisan documentary Study Voters Study Group, provided data to the Times on trends in Serbia that shows a very modestly fluctuating line from last January into this month. Biden's average over Trump ranged from 9.7 to 12 percentage points. I'm not seeing any substantial change since January, Griffin noted by email. Why then should there be any doubt about the outcome on November 4th? Let's take a look at the answers in the order listed above. And it talks a little bit about each, but I think we can kind of think about our own opinions about why there might be some issues. One of the major outcomes of this debate, what I think could swing very much towards Trump's direction if it were to happen, would be a debate against Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is somebody that is very politically smart, and somebody that, for how old he is very good at thinking on his feet. He's been that way his entire time as president, and it's led to many of his controversies during his presidential term, so it's not necessarily always a strong suit of Donald Trump. But Joe Biden is somebody who is obviously doesn't have it all with him, and it's almost kind of sad to see for a lot of people. I know I kind of feel that way about Donald Trump, or not Donald, but of Joe Biden, because it almost feels like almost elder abuse are trying to throw out a candidate because they think he's more politically better, although he's not all there with him. It's just rather harsh. But anybody who's noticed or paid attention to any politics knows that Donald Trump is a lot more able to think on his feet than Biden is. And Donald Trump is not afraid to personally attack you either. And Joe Biden can get angry, and in some of his better moments on the debate stage are when he's angry. But at the same time, I don't necessarily see Joe Biden having a very good debate performance, especially against Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is somebody that's even more aggressive than Bernie Sanders, when Bernie Sanders did go after Joe Biden on the Democratic debate stage. I just don't see it going in any favor towards Joe Biden. And I could see, if the debates do happen, which I don't think they are going to happen, but if they do happen, it could be a huge swing within polling towards Trump's direction. Now, the last article was by Fox News and Paul, and it states, new polls suggest Biden and Trump in dead heat in Georgia and Iowa. New polls released 6 weeks before the November election in two states President Trump won in his 2016 White House victory indicate that the race is currently deadlocked between the president and the Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. The former vice president and Trump are tied at 47% among likely voters in Iowa, according to a Des Moines registered released on Tuesday. 4% of those questioned to the public opinion survey said that they would vote for someone else, and 3% were unsure. An average of all of the most recent public opinion polls in Iowa, complied by Real Clear Politics, indicates that the president, with a slight 1.4 percentage point edge over Biden, President Barack Obama carried Iowa in 2008 and 2012 elections, but Trump flipped it from blue to red 4 years ago, topping 2016 Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton by 9 points. Their survey shows a vast gender divide, with the president lending 21 points among men and Biden ahead 20 points among women. I don't know if there's any race in history of presidential polling in Iowa that shows this kind of division, said Ayn. The poll, which was conducted between September 14th and 17th, prior to the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, also indicated Republican Senator Joni Ernst trailing Democratic challenger Teresa Greenfield by a narrow 3-point margin, 45 to 42. Greenfield's edge is within the survey's margin of error of plus or minus 3.5 percentage points. Biden and Trump are now also deadlocked at 47% among likely voters in Georgia, according to a New Atlantic Journal constitutional poll conducted by the University of Georgia School of Public and International Affairs. 4% of those questions were undecided and 1% were backing Libertarian nominee Joe Jorgensen. The poll was conducted September 11th through 20th, mostly before Ginsburg's death on Friday. So the fact that these two states are getting closer within this election time and within polling is a rather interesting idea. But real quick, before I sign out and give my last thoughts for all of this, I'll give you a chance to write in the comment section for everything else or whatever thoughts you might have here. For those who are watching live, I highly appreciate those who have showed up: Kelly Kinning, Jay Edgar, and on D Live, Andy What. And again, thank you so much for the follow on D Live. D Live is something I am trying to grow. So my D Live is also Roundtable Decision for those who want to follow. And I try to do my live stream of the podcast every Tuesday, but I'm not always consistent on that, as today's live stream is physically on Wednesday. But if you follow my Discord or Twitter, I tend to tweet out when I do my podcast live, in case you do want to jump on or have any comments for that. But I'll kind of end saying, again, thank you everybody who showed up now and who are going to listen in the future. I hope you enjoyed what I've heard. And if you enjoyed this type of content, make sure to follow Freedom Scoop and any of the content creators there. I highly appreciate